While brave Patroclus was attending the wounded Eurypylus in his hut, general fighting broke out between the Greeks and the Trojans. It did not look as though the Greeks' ditch and the wide wall behind it could hold out much longer. When the Greeks had built this wall, with the ditch alongside to protect their ships, they had failed to make impressive offerings to the gods, and so to ensure a safe haven for them, and the vast spoils they had taken. The wall was built without the goodwill of the immortal gods, and it did not last for long. While Hector was alive, Achilles angry, and Lord Priam's town unsacked, the great Greek wall survived. But later, when all the best of the Trojans were dead and many of the Greeks too, though some survived, when Priam's town had been sacked in the 10th year of the siege, and the Greek expedition had sailed for home, then Poseidon and Apollo decided to destroy the wall by unleashing upon it the force of all the rivers that run down from the range of Mount Ida to the sea. The names of the rivers were Rhesus, Heptaporus, Carissus, Rhodius, Granicus, Aesopus, divine Scamander, and Simois, on whose banks many a shield and helmet and many a warrior of that half-divine generation had fallen in the dust. When that day came, Phoebus Apollo brought all these rivers together at one mouth, and for 9 days he flung their waters at the wall, while Zeus reigned without ceasing to submerge it the quicker. Trident in hand, Poseidon the earth-shaker himself directed the torrent, washed out to sea all the wooden and stone foundations that the Greeks had laid with such labour, and levelled the shore of the fast-flowing Hellespont. When the wall had been destroyed, he covered the wide beach once more with sand, and turned the rivers back into the channels down which their lovely streams had run before. All this remained to be done by Poseidon and Apollo in the future. At the moment, however, the wall stood solid, and the hue and cry of battle flared up around it, the woodwork of its towers reverberating to the enemy's missiles. The Greeks, cowed by Zeus's scourge, were penned in and trapped beside their ships by the fear of Hector, the mighty master of the rout, who was fighting in the front ranks like a hurricane. As a wild boar or lion twists this way and that among the hounds and huntsmen to defy them in its strength, the men close their ranks, confront it like a wall, and pelt it with showers of spears. But there is no fear or thought of flight in the boar's dauntless heart. Its very courage kills it. Time and again it turns and tries some new point in the ranks, and wherever it charges, the ranks give way. So Hector went up and down among his men, urging the charioteers to cross the ditch. But not even his own swift horses would cross for him. They were frightened by its width, and halted at the brink, neighing shrilly. It was certainly not easy to leap across, or over in any way. Both banks were overhanging along its entire length, and on top there was a row of pointed stakes, close set and strong, which the Greek troops had planted there to keep out their enemies, so no horses pulling a chariot could easily break through the other side. The foot soldiers, however, were keen to attempt the crossing, and Polydamas went up to daring Hector and said, "Hector, and you other Trojan and allied commanders, it would be unwise to drive our chariots over the ditch. It's almost impossible to cross. There are sharp stakes along the edge, and close behind comes the Greek wall, leaving the charioteers no room to dismount and fight, and so narrow a strip that I am certain there would be casualties. If high, thundering Zeus is really on our side, has evil in mind for the Greeks and means to wipe them out, there is nothing I want more than to see them being destroyed here and now, far from Greece, with no trace left. But if they regroup and launch a counterattack from the ships, and we get entangled in the ditch, I don't think a single man would escape to bring the news to Ilium. So I suggest we all do what I now propose. Let our attendants hold our horses at the ditch, while we, on foot and fully armed, follow Hector in massed formation. The Greeks won't stand up to us, if their doom really is sealed." So spoke Polydamas, and his timely advice seemed excellent to Hector. Fully armed, he immediately leapt from his chariot to the ground, and all the other Trojans abandoned their formation and did the same when they saw Hector dismount. They all left their chariots in their driver's charge, with orders to hold their horses in good order there at the ditch. Then, dividing up, they organized themselves into groups and lined up behind their own leaders in 5 contingents. Of these, the best and biggest was the one commanded by Hector and matchless Polydamas. None showed greater enthusiasm to breach the wall and fight by the hollow ships. Cebriones, Hector's charioteer — Hector had replaced him in his chariot with an inferior fighter — was third in command. The second contingent was led by Paris, Alcathoas, and Agenor, and the third by 2 of Priam's sons, Helenus and godlike Deiphobus, with as third in commander the warrior Asius, whose huge sleek horses had brought him from Arisbe and the river Seleucus. Aeneas, handsome son of Anchises, led the 4th contingent, supported by 2 sons of Antenor, Archelochus and Acamas, men experienced in every kind of fighting. 5th, Sarpedon commanded the renowned allies, and had appointed under him Glaucus and warlike Asteropaeus, whom he considered beyond question the best men among the allies next to himself, he being the finest warrior of them all. They drew up in close formation, ox-hide shields touching, and resolutely advanced on the Greeks, in the confidence that nothing could stop them now from falling on the enemy ships. Of the Trojans and their famous allies, all except Asius, son of Hyrtacus, adopted the tactics suggested by admirable Polydamas, but Asius, commander of men, refused to abandon his chariot and charioteer, and decided instead to advance on the ships, chariot and all. He was a fool. He was not destined to evade the evil demons of death, and to drive back his chariot and pair in triumph from the ships to windswept Ilium. Before that, in the spear of noble Idomeneus, a hateful fate engulfed him. Asius drove at the left flank of the ships, where the Greeks had a crossing that they had used when returning from the plain. Here, Asius drove his chariot and horses over, and, coming to the gateway, found the doors had not been closed nor the long bar slid in place. The defenders were holding them open to give stragglers escaping from the battlefield a chance to reach the ships. So Asius in his chariot made straight for the gate, and his contingent followed, yelling shrilly. They thought the Greeks could not stop them now, but would be slaughtered beside their ships. The fools! At the gate they met 2 champions, proud sons of the warlike Lapith race. One was mighty Polypoetes, son of Perythorus, and the other was Leontius, equal of the murderous war god Ares. This pair had planted themselves in front of the high gate, like lofty mountain oaks that resist the wind and rain forever, supported by their long and sturdy roots. So the 2, relying on the strength of their arms, awaited the onslaught of great Asius and did not retreat. The Trojans, massing themselves around Lord Asius, Adamas, his son, Iamenus, Orestes, Thoon, and and oh my god! And Oenomaus held up their leather shields, and with a mighty shout made straight for the wall. For a while, the two Lapiths had been encouraging the Greek men-at-arms inside the ramparts to defend their ships from that point. But when they saw the Trojans storming the wall, and the Greeks yelling and panicking, they charged right out and fought in front of the gate, like a pair of wild boars in the mountains, facing a noisy mob of men and dogs. They charge with glancing blows, crushing and rooting up the undergrowth around them, noisily clashing their teeth, till at last they are hit by someone's spear and killed. So the shining bronze on the chests of the Lapiths clashed as it met the enemy blows. They put up a mighty defence, trusting in their own strength, and in the men on the wall above, who were flinging stones down from the well-built ramparts in defence of their lives, their camp, and seafaring ships. Rocks came pelting to the ground like snowflakes in a fierce blizzard, which sends the dark clouds scudding and thickly blankets the bountiful earth. So the rocks flew from the hands of Greek and Trojan alike. Helmets and bossed shields rang out harshly as the great boulders hit them. Then Asius groaned, slapped his thighs, and in exasperation spoke out. "So, Father Zeus, you are an absolute born liar. I never thought those Greek warriors could withstand our determination and invincible tenacity. But they're like supple-waisted wasps or bees that built their home by a rocky path and won't be driven from the hive, but stay and defend their children against the huntsman, in just the same way those two Greeks want to kill or be killed before they give way from the gate." So he spoke, but his words had no effect on Zeus, who had made up his mind to let Hector have the glory. Meanwhile, other Trojan contingents had carried the fighting to other gates. But it would be difficult for me to tell the whole story as if I had the abilities of a god. All along the stone wall fierce fires broke out, and the hard-pressed Greeks were compelled to fight for their lives and very ships. All the gods who had taken their side were in the depths of despair. But here it was the two Lapiths who now went on the offensive. Pirithous' son Polypoetes threw his spear and hit Damasus on the bronze-sided helmet. The helmet failed to repel it, and the point smashed right through the bone, splattering all the inside of the helmet with his brains. So he ended Damasus's assault. Next he killed Pylon and Ormenus. Meanwhile, Leontius, ally of the war god, flung his spear at Hippomachus, and caught him on the belt. Then he drew his sharp sword from its sheath and dashed into the throng, where he closed in on Antiphates. Antiphates. Not Antiphates. Oh my god. Where he closed in on Antiphates and struck him. Antiphates was hurled to the ground flat on his back. Then, in swift succession, Leontius brought Menon, Iamenus, and Orestes to the bountiful earth. While the Lapiths were stripping the shining armour from these men, the young Trojan warriors under Polydamas and Hector, who formed the best and biggest of the contingents, and had shown the greatest eagerness to breach the wall and set the ships on fire, were still standing along the ditch, hesitating to advance. The reason was that, just as they were going to cross, a bird of omen suddenly appeared to them, an eagle flying high across the front of the army from right to left, with a blood-red snake in its talons. This ominous creature was alive and still struggling. It had not let up on its will to fight. Twisting back on itself, it bit its captor on the breast beside the neck. At this, the eagle, in agony, released its hold, let the snake drop to the ground among the troops, and with a loud cry sailed away down the wind. The Trojans were appalled when they saw the snake lying there writhing about in their midst, a sign from Zeus who drives the storm cloud. Polydamas went straight up to daring Hector and said, "Hector, as a rule you object when I offer sound advice at your assemblies. It is, of course, entirely unfitting for your humble servant to disagree with you either in the council chamber or on the battlefield. He must only exalt your authority. But once again, I am now going to speak my mind and say what I think is best. We ought not to advance and fight the enemy around his ships. I know exactly what will happen if that bird of omen does not lie. Just as we were going to move forward, an eagle flew high across the front of the army, from right to left, with a blood-red snake in its talons. The snake was Why are you telling the story again? He knows. The snake was alive, and the bird dropped it before it reached its nest. It failed to get it home and give it to its young. In the same way, even if by great effort we succeed in breaking down the Greek gate and wall, and the enemy give way, we will not be able to make an orderly withdrawal from the ships over the same ground. We will have to leave many Trojans behind, and the Greeks, fighting in defense of their ships, will slaughter them. That is how a prophet, who really understood such omens and had the army's confidence, would interpret this sign." Hector of the flashing helmet gave him a black look and said, "Polydamas, that was an unusually ill-disposed speech of yours. You know you could have thought of something better. But if you really do mean what you say, then the gods themselves must have scrambled your brains. Loud, thundering Zeus himself made and confirmed to me certain promises. These you tell me to forget, and instead you would have me base my actions on long-winged birds who do not interest me at all. In fact, I don't care whether they fly to the right towards the morning sun or to the left into the western gloom. Let's pin our faith in the will of great Zeus, who governs all mankind and the gods as well. Fight for your country. That is the best and only omen. But why should you fear war and its ravages? Even if the rest of us are slaughtered wholesale by the Greek ships, you need have no fear for your own safety. You aren't the man to stand and fight it out. That said, if you personally shrink from the fighting or dissuade any of the others from battle, you will lose your life. And it will be my spear that ends it." With these words, Hector led off, and his men came after him with a mighty roar. From the mountains of Ida, Zeus, who delights in thunder, unleashed a hurricane that raised the dust and blew it straight at the ships, bewildering the Greeks and glorifying Hector and the Trojans. Trusting in this sign of divine favour and their own strength, they now made determined efforts to breach the great Greek wall, tearing away the parapets, pulling down the battlements and levering up the projecting buttresses that the Greeks had sunk into the ground outside to support the wall. By undermining these, they hoped to bring down the wall itself, but the Greeks would not give way. They closed up gaps in the battlements with their oxhide shields, and from there pelted the enemy as they came up beneath the wall. The two Ajaxes ranged everywhere along the walls, issuing orders and putting fresh heart into their men. Some they encouraged, but others, who had abandoned all resistance, they harshly rebuked. "Friends, it takes all sorts to make an army, the good, the bad, the indifferent, and today there is work for every man of you. But you know this well enough yourselves. You have your leader's orders. No one must turn back to the ships. Forward instead, straight at the enemy, urging each other on and trusting that Olympian Zeus, Lord of the lightning flash, will let us counter this attack and chase the enemy back to their town." So the two Ajaxes, cheering on the troops, inspired the Greeks for battle. As snowflakes fall thick and fast on a winter day when Zeus, wise in counsel, starts the snow falling and shows his missiles to men, he puts the winds to sleep, and it snows without ceasing till he has covered the high mountain tops and the bold headlands of the coast, and the clover meadows and the farmers' fields, till even the shores and inlets of the grey sea are under snow, and the waves cannot resist it as they come rolling in. Everything is blanketed by the blizzard sent by Zeus. So the stones flew thick and fast in both directions as the Greeks pelted the Trojans, and the Trojans the Greeks. The whole length of the wall thundered to volleys of rocks. But even then glorious Hector and his Trojans would not have broken down the gate in the wall, and the long bar, if Zeus, wise in counsel, had not launched his son Sarpedon against the Greeks, like a lion falling on cattle. Sarpedon held his fine round shield in front of him, made of beaten bronze, hammered out by the smith, and backed with hide after hide, stitched together with gold wire running right around it. With this in front of him, and brandishing two spears — how does he brandish two spears in one hand? — Sarpedon set out like a mountain lion who has long been in need of meat, impelled by his proud heart. He even assaults a strongly protected farmstead to make an attempt on the sheep, even if he finds herdsmen on the spot guarding the sheep with a ring of dogs and spears. He has no mind to be chased away without making an attempt on the fold, and either leaps in and seizes a sheep, or is himself struck down in the front ranks by a spear from a quick hand. So godlike Sarpedon's courage impelled him to assault the wall and break through the battlements. At once he addressed Glaucus, Hippolochus' son. "Glaucus, why are we most of all singled out for honour at home in Lycia, with pride of place, the choicest meat, and never empty cups? Why do they all look up to us as gods?" I mean, maybe it's because you're Zeus's son, but "And why do we cultivate a great estate on the banks of the river Xanthus, with lovely orchards and splendid fields of wheat? All this now obliges us to take our places in the front ranks of the Lycians and fling ourselves into the flames of battle. Only then will our Lycian men-at-arms say of us, 'Well, these two are no dishonourable lords of Lycia that rule over us and eat fat sheep and drink the best sweet wine. They are indomitable and fight in the forefront of the Lycians.' My friend, if, after living through this war, we could be sure of becoming ageless and immortal, I should not fight in the front line nor send you out into the battle where men win glory. But the world is not like that. 1,000 demons of death hover over us, and nobody can escape or avoid them. So in we go, whether we yield the victory to some other man or he to us." So he spoke, and Glaucus did not turn back or disagree, and the two went forward at the head of the great Lycian force. When he saw them coming, Menesthius shuddered. It was against his sector of the Greek ramparts that the menace was directed. Looking along the wall for some commander who could save his contingent from disaster, he saw the two Ajaxes, those gluttons for battle, standing quite near, along with Teucer, who had just come from his hut. But it was impossible to make himself heard by shouting. The noise was tremendous, and the very sky was assaulted by the din as shields, crested helmets, and gates were struck again and again. The gates had all been closed by now, and the Trojans were crowding round, trying to break them down and force their way in. At once Menesthius sent the herald to Thoötes. with a message to Ajax, son of Telamon. Quick, godlike Thoaotes, run and call Ajax, or rather both Ajaxes. That would be best of all. Death is staring us in the face here. The Lycian leaders have thrown in an overwhelming force, and so far they've proved powerful opposition in the heat of battle. But if our men have a battle on their hands over there too, let's at least have brave Ajax, son of Telamon, and tell him to bring Teucer, the expert bowman, with him. So he spoke, and the herald heard, complied, and set off at a run along the Greek wall. When he reached the two Ajaxes, he went up and spoke to them at once. You Ajaxes, leaders of the bronze-armoured Greeks, Mnestheus tells you to come over, if only for a little while, and lend him a hand in his difficulties, preferably both of you. That would be best of all. Death is staring us in the face there. The Lycian leaders have thrown in an overwhelming force, and so far they've proved powerful opposition in the heat of battle. But if you have a battle on your hands over here too, at least let brave Ajax, son of Telamon, come and bring Teucer, the expert bowman, with him. So he spoke, and great Ajax, son of Telamon, complied. He then spoke to Ajax, son of Oileus, with winged words. Ajax, you and powerful Lycomedes stay here and tell the Greeks to keep the enemy engaged, while I go and deal with the situation over there. I'll soon be back when I have shored up their defence. With these words, Ajax, son of Telamon, set off, and his half-brother Teucer went with him, with Pandion carrying Teucer's curved bow. They went along behind the wall and so reached the sector commanded by great-hearted Mnestheus, where pressure was intense. Here the mighty Lycian rulers and leaders were climbing the battlements like a dark hurricane. They hurled themselves at the enemy, and the tumult of battle rose. Ajax, son of Telamon, was the first to kill his man, a comrade of Sarpedon's, great-hearted Epicles. He's got epic in his name. He hit him with a jagged lump of rock that he picked up inside the wall from on top of a heap beside the battlement. Even the strongest young man of our generation would have found it difficult to lift with both hands, but Ajax heaved it above his head and flung it, crushing the helmet with its 4 plates and smashing the man's skull to pieces. Epicles dropped like a diver from the high tower, and the spirit left his bones. Meanwhile, Teucer hit powerful Glaucus, son of Hippolochus, with an arrow as he charged at the high wall. Teucer saw his arm exposed and hit it, ending Glaucus's interest in the fight. Glaucus at once jumped unobtrusively down from the wall, so that the Greeks might not see he was wounded and gloat over him. Sarpedon was horrified when he realized that Glaucus was gone, but it did not diminish his own will to fight. He stabbed at Alcmaeon with his spear, hit him and dragged the weapon out. The man came with it, falling headlong from the wall, and his ornate bronze armour clattered about him. Then Sarpedon got his mighty hands on the battlement. He gave a pull, and the whole length of the breastwork came away, exposing the top of the wall. He had made a breach for the hordes. Ajax and Teucer now took him on together. Teucer hit him with an arrow on the gleaming shoulder strap that ran across his chest and supported his man-covering shield. And though Zeus saved Sarpedon from destruction, not wishing that his son should meet his doom by the sterns of the ships, Ajax charged in and stabbed at his shield. The weapon failed to penetrate, but it stopped Sarpedon in his tracks, and he withdrew a little from the battlements. Even so, he did not retreat completely. He was still filled with hopes of glory, and wheeling round, he shouted to his godlike Lycians. Lycians, where is that old fighting spirit of yours? Strong as I am, I can hardly breach the wall on my own and open up our way to the ships. Rally round, the more the better. So he spoke, and the Lycians, fearing their leader's disapproval, attacked in greater numbers than ever round their leader, but the Greeks on their side reinforced the contingents behind the wall, and the struggle that ensued was desperate for both sides. The mighty Lycians could not break down the Greek wall and open up a way to the ships, nor were the Greek spearmen able to force back the Lycians once they had gained a foothold by the wall. As two men quarrel over the boundary markers in a common field, each with measuring sticks in their hands, fighting for their fair share in a narrow strip of ground, that was the distance they were kept apart by the battlements. Over the battlements, Trojans and Greeks hacked at each other from behind their oxhide shields, great and small, that protected their chests. Many a warrior's flesh felt the stab of the sharp bronze spear when they swung round and bared their backs, or when they were pierced through the shield itself. All along, the towers and battlements were drenched in blood from both sides, Trojan and Greek. And yet, the Trojans were unable to set their enemies on the run. The Greeks held on, like a careful wool worker who holds up her scales to balance the wool against the weights and check the accuracy of the meagre pittance she is earning for her children. The struggle was as tight and even as that, till the moment when Zeus gave the upper hand to Hector, son of Priam, who was the first to leap inside the Greek wall. Hector sent his voice ringing out to the whole Trojan army. "On with you, horse-taming Trojans! Smash the Greek wall and fire the ships!" So he spoke, and there was no Trojan ear that did not catch his stirring call. Massing together, they charged at the wall and began to scale the parapet with sharp spears in their hands. But Hector seized and brought along a rock that was lying in front of the gate. Broad at the base and coming to a point, it would have taxed the strength of the two best men in any town of present generation to lever it up from the ground onto a wagon. But Hector handled it effortlessly on his own. Zeus, son of sickle-wielding Cronus, had made it light for him. As a shepherd easily picks up a ram's fleece in one hand, carries it off, and scarcely feels the weight, so Hector lifted up the rock and brought it towards the planking that made up the high, strong, well-fitted double gates, which were held on the inside by two beams sliding in from either gatepost, locked by a single bolt. Hector went right up to them, and bracing himself, legs well apart for maximum power, hurled the rock, hit the doors full in the middle, and smashed it out of its pivots on either side. The force of the throw propelled the rock through, and there was a great roar from the gate as the planks were smashed to splinters by the impact of the stone, and the bars gave way. In leapt glorious Hector, face dark as nightfall. He held two spears in his hands, and the bronze of his body armour gleamed with a baleful light. None but a god could have met and held him as he sprang through that gate. And now, with fire flashing from his eyes, he wheeled round to the crowd behind him and called on the Trojans to cross the wall. His men responded to his summons. Some swarmed over the wall, others poured in through the gate itself. The panic-stricken Greeks fled back to their hollow ships, and all hell broke loose.